Excuse me. Everybody needs to turn, I can mute all.
Who's listening right now? Can you mute
We can't
yourself?
hear anything.
I don't hear,
All right, can you hear me?
You have to use the mic. You have to turn the mic on.
Okay. Can you hear me
All
okay?
right. I can hear you, okay, but we can't have 15 people talking at one time because
That's
there's just no way this is going to be a productive meeting.
That's correct. So as I said,
So
Mr.
let me
Raywood,
introduce myself.
yeah, Mr. Raywood, before we get started, we just need to do a couple of procedural formalities on our end because this has been noticed as a special meeting. So just give us a minute to open the meeting and then we can get started, okay?
Sure.
Okay, go ahead, Kathy.
how can I put it on? There's a different can.
You ready?
Yep.
All right. Debbie?
Okay, this meeting is being held in accordance with the Open Public Meeting Act, NJSA 10:4-6 et sec. Notice having been published according to law with a copy on file in the city clerk's office, and a copy posted on the bulletin board in City Hall.
Roll call.
Councilmember Von Rudenberg.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Canestrino.
Here.
Councilmember Pataglia.
Here.
Councilmember Carroll.
Here.
Mayor LaBrus is absent.
He's online. Yep.
Oh, hello. I did not see him there. Okay.
Will everyone please stand for the pledge?
Pledge allegiance to the
United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Steve, so I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yep. So, Mr. Raywood, before we turn it over to you, I just want to briefly say that we arranged this meeting with your help, and we very much appreciate that. At the last city council meeting, quite a number of people spoke with their concerns about the CSLR application at a property at 125 Willow. Because CSLRs, as far as we can understand, are regulated through your office, the Department of Community Affairs at the state of New Jersey. There were many questions that we were unable to answer because, as I said, this process is really driven by you. So I reached out to you, explained this, and you and DCA agreed to come here and hear from the community, and I think explain this process a little bit further. We have approximately, I want to say 15 to 20 people here in the council chambers. It looks like there's a significant number of people online. We'd like to give as many people an opportunity to speak as possible, but just ask that, people keep their comments brief, keep them respectful. There is some passion on this issue, as I'm sure you can understand. But these folks from DCA have taken time out at the end of a long work day to come and speak to the community, and they should be applauded for that, and we do appreciate it. So we would let them sort of start this off, explain where they're coming from, and then we would like to ask them to hear from some of you regarding the concerns and questions that you have so that they can answer them for you. So that's why we're here. I'll turn it over to you, and as I said, we do appreciate you being here.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you very
Mr.
much,
Lyman,
Mr. Lyman, and
we thank you
we
for the
thank you for the
opportunity
opportunity
to discuss this openly with the community.
here.
So, what I
what I would like to do is I'd like to explain the process. The previous administration felt that the department needed to contribute something to the opioid epidemic, and many of you may know, many of you may not know, the Bureau of the Bureau of Rooming and Boarding House Standards within the DCA is basically a bureau, it's a regulatory agency that's concerned with bricks and mortars. We're not a placement agency, we're not a social service agency. So what we decided to do, what our contribution would be to revise the regulations governing rooming and boarding houses during the 2017 year to create a new class of rooming house. So these regulations were proposed and adopted in 2017. Excuse me. They became effective in 2018. From that point on, the Bureau started accepting applications to regulate rooming and boarding houses, well, the new class of rooming and boarding house, which is a Class F cooperative sober living residence. So what is a cooperative sober living residence? I'm just going to use a short version, the CSLR. The Bureau revised not only the regulations governing rooming and boarding houses, but the Uniform Construction Code. The Uniform Construction Code states that any 1 or 2 family dwelling can be converted to a cooperative sober living residence without the need for a new certificate of occupancy. Normally, when you change the use of a building under the UCC, that requires a new certificate of occupancy because you may have changed that use to a much more restrictive use, which may require more life safety components. This was not the case with the CSLR. When they decided that any 1 or 2 family dwelling could be converted, they decided that it was not a change of use, but however, it was a change in the character of use and the building itself. Now we're talking about the building. The building itself remained classified as a single family residence. The intent of DCA back in those days was to construct a set of regulations that would allow these CSLRs to remain where they're at, within single-family resident neighborhoods that are zoned for single-family homes. Again, because there is no change of use, this building can, if the building is large enough, can accommodate up to 10 individuals, not including or exclusive of the licensed operator or naturally the owner and the respective families. We keep getting new additions, so I have to break and admit them, and I apologize for that. So with that being said, the Bureau started accepting applications, and it's been a process to understand the needs of these facilities versus how they fit within our regulatory scheme. So now with what was happening now is, we're getting these applications, we're reviewing them, and prior to 2018, the Bureau required proof of prior zoning approval for any type of rooming or boarding house within the community. That requirement was removed from the regulations. So moving forward, we do not require zoning approval. We require zoning approval. The DCA does not have jurisdiction over local zoning ordinances or land use laws. We simply look at the application, look at the building. Is it complete? Is the application complete? Can the building support the intended use? And to that end, we require that the building survive a inspection by DCA construction officials. Well, they'll go in and they'll ensure that the building does not have any obvious violations of the Uniform Construction Code, that the life safety components are in place for smoke alarms and carbon monoxide alarms, and the egress standards that are captured in the Uniform Construction Code. So every bedroom or every room that's used for sleeping must have a window that meets the egress standards in the Uniform Construction Code. The Bureau, required. Sorry. The Bureau required the CSLR register as a life hazard use with the Division of Fire Safety. And what does it? Now the use. Life hazard use designation requires that the building be inspected by a certified fire official to ensure that the building complies with the Uniform Fire Code for the intended use and the intended number of occupants. And then finally, the Bureau team does an evaluation in the building where we'll go in and we'll measure every room that's used for sleeping. We'll measure the overall size of the building, and then from that point on, we'll measure every bedroom to see what the actual occupancy can be, and that will end up being the licensed capacity. Currently, we have about 240 licensed CSLRs throughout the state. For the most part, the reports found of these CSLR operators are very good. These are homes where up to 10 individuals can live and support one another in their recovery. They don't operate, they don't function like a typical rooming house where the residents may not know one another and just pass each other in hallways. These residents sit down to eat together usually. They all have assigned duties typically in these facilities. The law, the Boarding House Act, 1979, mandates that every facility, every CSLR has a licensed operator that maintains residents in the building. We will grant a operator we will issue a license to an operator that does not live in the building, provided that the CSLR operator or licensee in this case provides 24/7 awake and alert staff coverage. Provides us with a schedule so that we can confirm that when we conduct unannounced spot checks on the facility. If Joe is listed as the person in charge, then Joe better be on site in charge. So, you know, these facilities have been functioning well. We've got facilities in Upper Sussex and even Bergen County in very magnificent homes. You know, we've got some in Main Street in South Jersey that are not as magnificent, but for the most part, they seem to be working very well. We have not had many instances or any instances of any kind of violent crime that is associated with the CSLR resident or the CSLR. And for the most part, they've been functioning very well. That's about all I can say now as far as the process. The Bureau conducts evaluations at least once a year. If we're informed of some concerns with maybe crowding or unkempt conditions, that type of thing, we will conduct a unannounced spot check. The Bureau is authorized to do these inspections under the Rooming and Boarding House Act of 1979, which enables us to conduct an inspection without prior notice at any time. So this is what we do. We've been out after 6, before 6 in the morning, after 6 at night. And we've had on weekends. It's what the Bureau does to ensure that these facilities are operating and compliant with the rules. If they don't, they're issued penalties. They end up in the enforcement unit. The penalties can vary from $50 to $5,000 per occurrence. And we do enforce that. Yes, we do adjust the amount of penalties based on the individual's willingness to comply. Or, you know, if they've demonstrated compliance, but for the most part, you know, if we issued you a penalty, you're paying the bill. So, any questions?
Well, I know there's quite a number of members of the public here since we got started. I think it's about 25 plus the number of people online. What I will say before I turn it over is, as you're aware, you know, the reason that there is community concern, and I think it is something that you are going to be asked to address, is there were numerous instances that gave rise to community concerns about this particular application. There have been, as you are aware, they were operating illegally. They were fined several $1,000s for that already. I believe they accepted that penalty and did not contest it. But before that, many members of the community were observing conduct that they found disturbing and troubling. There have been other instances where our zoning official went to investigate before we knew that this was a CSLR application. And she's here, and she was told something completely untrue by the applicants. Even most recently, the property was left in an unkempt status, though I believe that may have been remediated today. So the community, the community's concern is, are these folks, if they are going to be licensed, are they going to operate in a responsible manner? And considering the city, we don't even have the construction office file, is my understanding, is that it will be over to you. And that, obviously we can enforce criminal laws and other codes, but there have been a lot of issues to this point that have brought us to this place where you've got the level of community interest that we've seen. And so that's the concern of the governing body, that's the concern of the citizenry is, how do we know, given indisputed facts, that these folks are going to operate responsibly if you give them this license? And I think there's going to be a lot of questions, so I might want to start out with that, and then maybe we can proceed to have some more specifics from the council, from the public.
If we may, can we open it up to the public here and let the folks that are here ask their questions first, and then have folks that are online follow and ask their questions? Would that be acceptable to you folks?
Yes, that'd be fine.
Okay, so I'll need a motion to open to the public.
Second.
Councilmember
All right, so I would like to
Aye.
address Mr.
Deputy Mayor Canestrino?
Aye.
Councilmember Pataglia?
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll? Mayor LaBrus?
He's here.
Yeah, I got it. Okay.
So anyone who is coming to speak from the public, I ask, again, I'll repeat as our city attorney has, please be respectful and keep your comments brief. And the only thing that you may talk about tonight is 125 Willow Street. That's the purpose of this meeting, so we're not going to distract or talk about other situations. If everyone can agree and accept that. Okay. So with that, they will come up one at a time, and hopefully you folks can answer their questions. So I don't know, folks, if you want to form a line here in the aisle, sometimes that's what we do, or just come up one at a time. So whoever would like to speak, please come forward. And give your name to the clerk, if you would.
Hey, how are you? My name is John Pierson. I lived in Hackensack for 63 years. I lived next door to that house for about 33. I knew Emmy Jean, who lived there, ever since I moved to that house.
Can you hear okay? Can you hear? Mr. Raymond, can you hear the speaker?
Yeah, I'm kind of hearing deficient anyway, so if I have a problem, I have a set of headphones here, I'll put them on.
Okay.
But go ahead, sir. For now, I can hear you.
Put them on now.
Yeah, the mic is on, right? Yes.
Maybe stand as close to it as you can.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
So anyway, I guess my question is, when Irene sold the house, when her mother passed away, she sold the house. She told me it was a father-in-law buying the house for a young couple who were going to live there. And then we find out that this is going on, right? I mean, they brought people in there. We start seeing them walk around the streets. And I mean, you want to help these people, like everyone else. We want to help them. But to me, they were kind of like deceiving us from the very beginning. So my question to you, how do you vet this guy? He's applying for a license. How do you vet him? I mean, if he has a criminal record, can you get a license? Or even the person who is going to match him, you said the guy who gets the license doesn't actually have to live there. So he can hire someone else to monitor or run that house. Now, is that person vetted also? Is that person, what if that person's a drug dealer or a past drug dealer or whatever?
So let me explain what the law requires. Under the Rooming and Boarding House Act of 1979, the law states very clearly, any person that owns or operates must be licensed, must apply for and obtain a license. So this is a rooming and boarding house. So we have a unique situation here. We have the owner of the property and we have the owner of the program. So what we have to do is license the owner of the property. Now, in this particular case, there are 3 individuals that are listed as a deeded owner of the property. Mr. Brucato is the primary owner, okay?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
Wait, 1 second. When one person's speaking, everyone will have their turn. Let's all be respectful, because otherwise we're not gonna accomplish anything. I know we're all passionate, but let's try and let the speakers speak.
like I said, my question is like the vetting process. Like, you know, what if the guy who monitors the house, you know, if he has a criminal record? I don't know. I'm just saying.
Just saying.
I'm going to explain that.
Drug trafficker, just saying.
So we have 3 individuals that own a house. The Bureau requires that an individual be designated by the ownership as the primary owner. That doesn't mean that person owns more interest of the property than any of the other members of their partnership, LLC, corporation, whatever. That term only means that it's the individual that's designated to accept service of penalties, our notices, our evaluation reports, correspondence. We can't talk to 3 people at once if your licensing fees are due. We can't talk to 3 people at once if you've got an evaluation report with open violations. So that person is the individual that's designated as the primary owner. That is Mr. Brucato. Mr. Brucato has applied for a license, and the vetting process is we conduct the first thing we do is we conduct a criminal history report. If there's some reason to take it to the next level, that, you know, something that appears on the criminal history report that says, okay, this guy needs to answer some questions, or this guy needs to provide some references, or this gal for that matter, then we take it to the next level. Because the law requires any person that owns or operates a rooming and boarding house apply for and obtain a license, we have that entity that's the deeded owner of the property. When all is said and done, they'll get a license to own. Their influence on the day-to-day operation of the CSLR will be non-existent. It's the individual that is operating, I think it's Anthony Hill, with Lux Sober Living. He is the owner of the CSLR program. The control of the property has been conveyed to Anthony Hill and his LLC, or the LLC he's a member of, by virtue of a lease, or I think it's a lease in this particular case. So now we have the owner of the property and the person who's exercising control of the property as the owner, and that's Mr. Hill. Mr. Hill is the individual I contacted after Mr. Kleinman sent me those photos about the property. I said, you got to do something here, and apparently it's got done. So I do appreciate that, Mr. Kleinman, that feedback. Nonetheless, so now the owner of the property really, unless they're owning the CSLR program themselves, they have no influence. They have nothing involved in the day-to-day operations of the CSLR. What they're doing every month is sitting back and waiting for the rent check. That's all they're doing. It's the person who they conveyed control of the property to that is responsible for the day-to-day operations. So if we go there 6 months from now, let's say when they're licensed, and we find out, you got to paint that wall, and we cite them to paint that wall. We go back to 30 days, that wall's not painted, we're going to issue a penalty. We're going to issue a penalty to the operator of the CSLR, Anthony Hill in this case, not Brucato, Kelly, and whoever else is involved in that, the ownership of the property.
How many penalties before you close it down?
Well, listen, if they are a problematic facility, we've pulled the trigger many a times in the past.
Okay.
If we need to issue a license revocation, I don't have any problem doing that.
Okay.
But it's got to be substantiated. It's got to be adjudicated by a judge, an administrative law judge as well.
Yeah.
So it's not just willy-nilly, I'm coming here tomorrow.
Yeah.
So everybody's entitled to the right to due process. You know that as well as I do.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker?
You're welcome.
No, I mean, look, if there's time, Mr. Raywood is here, he's got limited time, so I think
Let's let everyone have their turn, and then the other folks that want online to have their turn, and then if we have more time left, we'll allow it. How's that? To be fair to everyone that's also online.
Hello, my name's Stella, and I'll ask 2 questions. I don't want to take up too much time. But question 1, what about the sober living home being so close to the park and the daycare? Are there any distant restrictions in those locations, or can the city set a distant restriction?
The Bureau does not have any restrictions on where the cooperative sober living residences are located. There are, local zoning laws that are, there's a municipal licensing law that if the town has adopted that to regulate them, then that may prohibit the proximity of a sober living home to schools and one another and daycare. But the regulations governing rooming and boarding houses do not regulate where the sober living home can be.
Okay, and then 2, since substance abuse has become commodities and the nation's estimated $42 million addiction recovery industry is growing, is there a limit to the number of CSLRs that will be issued? It's a very profitable business, so we should all get into it.
Actually, no, there's no limit as far as I know. And I don't have the source of this information other than to say it's the federal government. But they do recommend a 14-month program in a CSLR for somebody for a CSLR-like program to complete the recovery process.
Folks,
Okay, and if I can last,
if
I
you
guess
want
I'll
to
ask,
step out in the hallway, please, because it's very disrespectful to those that are trying to speak.
if I can just ask one last question. How is the number of residents decided? This is a small residential home. These types of homes typically would be 2 adults, maybe 2 or 3 children. The state should not allow 10 residents to live here. It will put a strain on the city's resources, the police, fire, garbage, sewer, etc.
No, the state and the Bureau does not allow 10 residents to live in a facility that does not comply with the regulations to allow 10 residents. So I'll give you an example. I think Mr. Kleiman gave me some information about this particular home. A single person can reside in a bedroom that's 80 square feet net floor area. Now, what does that mean? That means that if you look at a bedroom, that ceiling throughout the entire 80 square feet has to be 7 feet. It can't be a slope ceiling like you would see in a dormer situation, typically the upper levels. It can't have closets. It can't have bathrooms intruding in that space. So you need 80 square feet of net floor area for one individual. When you go to a second individual in the same room, that number, that 80 square feet number goes down to 60. So in order to have 2 people in one bedroom, you have to have 120 square feet of net floor area. That's what the Bureau does when we do our final inspection. Every single application we have received and then there's probably 40 applications pending, some type of review, but every application we have received to date has said, I want 10 people. And until we go there and find out, well, first of all, you need 150 gross square feet for one resident and 100 square feet thereafter for every additional resident, And that's just taking the picture of the building. That's kitchens, hallways, bathrooms, whatever, living rooms. That's wall to wall, okay? When we fine tune that amount and say, okay, well, now how about bedrooms? Do you have enough space, first of all, for 10 residents? So you would need a house that's, in this case, about 1,150 square feet. If you refine that by, well, bedrooms. I mean, you've got a living room and a kitchen and a dining room that are not sleeping rooms. So maybe in your bedrooms, like you said, you have 2 adults and 2 or 3 kids. Maybe those bedrooms will only yield 6 to 7 residents. So we're not going to license a facility that does not comply with the regulations for occupancy standards.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Before we go on to the next, Steve, could you answer, do we have anything, or Bridget is here, do we have anything in our code that speaks directly to the proximity to daycares and parks as to allow or disallow this type of?
As I understand it, and Bridget can come up, but my understanding is that these boarding homes are not a permitted use at all in this zone. So if the DCA's position, which has been not particularly clearly expressed, is that, that local zoning requirements apply, then this is a boarding house and it would not be legal.
Right.
It would have to be exempt from our own zoning code because it certainly falls within that definition, at least the way our zoning code is written. So there wouldn't be any need for any exception to be 400 or 500 feet because they wouldn't be allowed at all in this particular residential area. Is that correct? I'm just asking my zoning official who's here.
Yes, exactly. They're strictly prohibited, outright.
So I don't know what DCA is, we've discussed this issue and it's not been real clear, quite frankly. DCA has said we don't, we don't enforce local zoning codes, but it's been suggested that these essentially are preempted and have to be allowed because it is a one-family home. And so because it's a one-family home, that CSLRs, any place you allow one-family homes, have to be allowed. That's the way that it's been explained to me. If you can confirm that or advise otherwise, because then we may have an issue if you're saying our just local zoning code applies, then they shouldn't be allowed to operate in the first place under our code.
Because it's strictly prohibited.
Because it's strictly prohibited.
Have rooming houses in that particular area.
And even community,
Bridget, can you come up to the mic?
even community,
homes for disabled persons, they're conditional use. They have to meet conditions. So, and they would have to go to a board and get board approval for that. So, but boarding houses are strictly prohibited. There's no conditions because they're not allowed.
Again, that's something that we can't say you're allowed because Hackensack's zoning code says you're not allowed. Prior to 2018, when we required proof of prior zoning approval, and they didn't come up with the zoning approval, didn't provide it, I should say, then we were not able to license them. As it stands now, we can't not license them just because they may or may not violate a local zoning code.
So I mean, so that leads to, sort of an interesting scenario, because if they're licensed, I mean, if DCA is not telling us that we have to accept them, then they are not compliant, and we certainly couldn't waive that unless we are required to by some law or regulation that supersedes us. The DCA has been not particularly clear in terms of their position on this, because there is suggestion that, as I said, that these things, if it's a one-family home that was previously a one-family home, just because it's used for this purpose, then it has to be used for this purpose. If not, then we will have to deal with that on the zoning issue. if, you know, and again, obviously, they have not been licensed yet. They are not operating, to be clear. So we're not in a position right now, because we don't know if they're definitively going to get a license or what, for us to take action. But if you do license them, and DCA is not taking the position that we cannot enforce our zoning code, then we may well have to enforce our zoning code and issue a zoning violation, and this would have to be addressed pursuant to our typical procedures, where they could go, I suppose they could apply for a variance, you know, I mean, even if they're not permitted, they still could apply to one of our land use boards, but it might or might not be accepted.
Correct. That's the relief granted to them.
So that's our dilemma here. I mean, it's very specific in our code within the city that they are prohibited use. And I don't know how you step over that, so I'm sorry, I don't.
Well, again, that would be up to Hackensack to enforce that ordinance.
Yes, so that's
You know,
what will
it's-
have to happen. To do is not have to get to that point, is to try and
Education.
help you understand what our local ordinances are. So before we get to that point, we act proactively and say, this is not allowed based on our code. This is a prohibited use based on our code. It's not even a conditional use, it's a prohibited use. Therefore, you need to take that into consideration rather than put something there when you know that then we are going to have to take action. It just doesn't make any sense to us, and I hope you can explain that to us as a council and to folks that are here.
Hi, my name is Margaret, and my questions are going to be on leasing, but I do have a question about spacing that you're talking about, because you are talking about spacing that sounds like a really, really large area. And I don't know if you know what a Cape Cod is, type style house, because this is what this house is. And this house doesn't have a lot of space, and no 10 people can get jammed in here to sleep. You may get 5 if they sleep in the living room, maybe. So
Well,
I think you guys have picked the wrong house, so that's just my personal opinion. But this is my leasing questions. Mr. Rainwood, I was under the impression that Anthony Burcato applied to license a CSLR at 125 Willow. It was later come to my attention the license application is Anthony Hill and Luxor Sober Living. What date did Mr. Burcato submit for a license?
well, again, you know, the Mr. Mercado has demonstrated that he has a clean record. They paid their fees.
What date?
The licensing fees.
What date?
So-
What date? What date did he submit?
I'm sorry?
What date did he submit?
What spate? What
What date?
submitted-
Date. D-A-T-E. Date.
Yeah, I got the state. Well, he submitted
No,
the
the
application.
date, the D-A-T-E did he submit?
When?
When?
They're looking for the date of the submittal for the
The
license.
date on the
Oh, the
calendar.
date.
The date, yes, sir.
I'm sorry.
That's
Let me see.
okay.
That's okay.
That's okay.
Give me a second here, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I don't want to delay this, but I can tell you one thing, that we
No, we-
conducted,
We need a date. We want
I'm
to
going
know
to
a
give you a
date.
date.
Could you give me, was it beginning of summer? Was it April? Was it May?
The date was April 28th, April 17th, 2023.
And what about Mr. Hill? When did he submit for the license?
I believe that we got the entire package at the same time.
Oh,
Let me just double check.
okay.
Let me just double check.
And I do want to point out, the city was not noticed until till around July 10th. We were not aware because that led to some of the issues that started this.
Okay.
So, this was first brought to
So
the city's attention then.
Right.
April 17th. So how many
I'll address that,
licenses
and I-
were accepted for 125 Willow? How many
So
licenses?
we received the application from Mr. Hill on April 14th, 2023.
Okay. And how many licenses were accepted for 125 Willow?
How many, what?
Licenses
Or submitted.
were submitted.
Well, there'll only be 3 licenses that will be issued.
No, for the.
One will be for the owner of the property. One will be for the owner of the CSLR program, and one will be for the licensed operator that lives in the facility.
So there's only 2 for that address?
And how many were submitted by Anthony Hill from Luxor Sober Living?
We received an application,
One?
one application
okay.
from Mr. Hill.
And how
With
about
a
any other
second-
persons from Luxor Sober Living? Any other people?
Just Mr. Mercado, Lux Sober Living, and the operator.
Who's the operator?
Who's the operator?
Is Karina something, hang on a second. Karina Pascucci.
Okay.
Spell that.
Could you spell that for us?
Puscucci is the last name, and Karina
Yeah,
is the
Karina.
first name.
Okay.
Karina.
Who are the members of Lux Sober Living LLC?
Who are the members?
It's a cute little house.
Anthony Hill is the only member of Lux Sober Living.
Okay. Okay, the LLC? Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Next person.
But you can't come out exactly because it's
Good evening, Mr. Raymond.
Good evening.
My question is a bit tied with the first gentleman that spoke, but then I'm going to add on to that, related with how the department does background checks and how they vet the people who are applying for a license. Now, I understand that you said he is a co-owner, a primary owner, that none of that matters, but here's the thing. Just like with any job application, we have references that support our character, support the person that you are interviewing, or the person that you're considering giving a job. So I want to ask you, Mr. Raymond, Raywood, what is the purpose of the listing of a reference on your licensee application? What is the purpose of having that reference? What do you do with that person who's listed as a character reference for the person applying for a license?
Well, again, as I stated earlier, we have a process. When we receive an application, there's a notice of authorization that allows us to conduct a criminal background check to see if there's a criminal history. If we conduct that criminal history and we see, we have to look into things, that's when we'll contact the references. That's when we may require the applicant to provide answers to questions that we have, which is a typical criminal history questionnaire. That's the time that we will say, well, you have to provide an additional reference, a written reference. And it can't be somebody that's associated with your family. It can't be somebody that's associated with your business. It can't be somebody that's associated with the CSLR program.
Okay, thank you. So, to the best of my knowledge, the license application that was filed has Mr. Kelly listed as the reference, a character reference. Now, there's two things flawed with that. Number one, he is the father-in-law of the person applying for the license. Secondly, again, it's been brought to my attention that Mr. Kelly has quite an questionable criminal background. Something that you really want to look into, given that we're talking about a sober living residence, if you get where I'm going with that. I'm sure that if you look into it, you will see very pertinent details about that particular criminal background that does not lend to having him as the person that you're going to have as a reference, because the reference, in my opinion, humble opinion I should say, is to endorse a person's character. But if the person has a criminal record, how can we as residents in this neighborhood feel safe that the Bureau is doing due process and that the process is not flawed? The way I see it, it's completely flawed.
License, so there is no reason that DCA would conduct a criminal background, nor can we, because he's not provided that authorization form. And secondly, as I've explained earlier, that group that owns that property will have nothing to do with the day-to-day operations of the CSL.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I feel that that is a very important point, because this is how we have a conflict of interest. You know, you have a criminal record, you can't do or apply directly, so you get someone else to do or operate or whatever the case may be. Wow. And that's how you circumvent the whole, you know, you go around the system.
Well, we don't know he has a criminal record because we have not done a criminal background check.
So maybe
Again,
that's something that the department needs to do, perhaps, to show that the state that we pay our taxes to is looking out for us?
No, I understand, but again, he has not applied. So,
He's a reference
and
though.
understanding,
He's not applied, but
Right.
he is listed as the person giving a character reference. If he has no character, what reference are you providing?
does not specify, and maybe it should, but that doesn't specify who you can list as your personal references.
You said earlier it can
You
be
know,
a family
my wife and
member.
I had shared.
You said earlier, I'm sorry to interrupt you, you said earlier he can be a family member, but he's the father-in-law of the applicant.
Right,
So
well,
how do we
again,
justify that? We're kind of, you know, not following process
Is he
then.
gonna ask for a new reference?
Perhaps a new reference is needed?
well, our application, nor did the regulations say that you have to supply a reference outside of your family. You know, and if we had taken it to the next level, if there was a reason to take it to the next level, then if we had found this out, then we maybe would not have accepted that. In this case, we didn't have to, you know, explore their personal references.
So I understand that was in the past. Now all of this has been made aware to you. You're aware, so maybe now in the present, we could look into it and dig into that and see what you find?
Again,
Before
I
approving the license, or is it already approved?
Right. Now, I understand what you're saying, and I understand you completely, but we can't just willy-nilly look into somebody's background.
Mr. Raywood, this investigation or this information has been brought to our attention by reliable sources. So we are asking you as a state official to take the initiative and re-investigate this application and re-look at the license, the applicant who's applying for this license, and the background checks of the references that are involved.
Okay, and I understand that, but again, the applicant has no criminal record and meets our standards for licensure. Now, I can't stress enough.
What exactly do you do with the reference? What is the purpose of the reference in an application for a CSLR?
That was my first question.
I still didn't quite get that. So.
What is the purpose of having a reference on an application?
Again, if there's a reason to explore the individual's references, because maybe they're not of the moral character that we would like or expect, then we would ask, and regardless, even if the individual had a reason for us to look at and contact their personal references, we require the applicant to provide reference beyond what they listed on the application.
We're done, thank you.
Thank you. Next person, please.
Good evening, Mr. Aywood. I'm going to ask some questions regarding the rental.
Excuse me, may we have your name first for the record?
My name is Barbara, okay? And I'm trying to get to the bottom of what the financial structure is regarding this property. How much rent is Mr. Kelly, the owner at 125 Willow, getting paid in rent by Anthony Hill and Lux Sober Living?
I'm sure it's on the lease if you want me to look it up and
Would you please?
or if you,
Because I live next to this house. It is a 2-bedroom. It has a finished basement. The owners eventually finished the attic, 1 big room. There's not a whole lot of space in this house.
well, again, we're going to measure the interior space of that house, and that will determine how many residents we will license the facility for. So what the Bureau does is we'll set a license capacity, and they may have applied for 10, but maybe they only have the room for 6. So we'll issue a license capacity for 6. And when we're doing our inspections or evaluations, if my team is there and they see, there's maybe 8 people there, now that's a violation. That's a serious violation. Again, if we get complaints that there are, or more people there than the license capacity allows, which is exclusive of the licensed operator, by the way, and the owner, we'll conduct an unannounced spot check and count beds, count toothbrush. I mean, that's, we've done this for since 1979, is regulate these facilities like this. So we'll set the limits on how many people are allowed to reside there as residents under the sober living.
All right, my next question is, how much will the residents be required to pay out of pocket for rent?
That's entirely between the sober living operator and the residents. We do not regulate rents.
Okay.
We do not regulate how much they are. We do not regulate the when they're paid. They have to post their rates and services so that when somebody walks in there saying, well, he's paying 100, I'm paying 200, why is that? That's something that they have to resolve internally.
How much, are any tax breaks for the owners of 125 Willow going to be given if they acquire a CSLR license? And if so, what exactly? Are they getting a tax break by applying for this license?
That I don't know.
You can't tell me that in the state of New Jersey, with all the communities that you put homes in, you don't know what tax breaks they may be getting, if any?
No, I have no idea.
So who do we
I don't even do my
Who
own
do we
taxes.
go to find this out?
I would suggest that you start with an attorney or a CPA.
They don't.
They're familiar with the tax laws. I don't know why you would get a break, but again, I'm not a tax professional. I couldn't tell
Who
you.
sets the tax?
Who sets, is it the city of Hackensack that sets, or is something done on the state level regarding the taxes with one of these homes?
As far, just so I'll say, as far as we're aware, we are taxing this property conventionally. And I don't, right now, and I don't know of any reason why we would not continue to do so if they operate for property tax purposes. Those are the only taxes that we collect.
So they're not getting any discounts to your knowledge, and they are paying their quarterly taxes?
Right
As
now,
I-
they're not licensed yet.
As far as I'm, regardless of whether they're licensed or not, like any other property owner, as far as I'm aware, they are paying their taxes conventionally, and I have no knowledge that they are not paying their taxes as required. I believe the property has a mortgage, so they'd have to. You know, it's probably, I would almost certainly be done through the escrow of the mortgage.
Okay, and so there is nothing stating that they're going to get any sort of discount on either state level or through the
Well, I can
town?
speak for the local level. We have no, as I said before, the city is, we've never seen this before in the city. We have no familiarity with how this program works at the state. There have not been any other applications of this nature in Hackensack. So if there's some state subsidy or program, if Mr. Raywood doesn't know, we certainly sitting up here do not know.
Okay, thank you.
What was the rent, Barbara?
Oh,
What was the rent?
oh, what is, yes, well, what is the rent that he's getting? Do you know? You said it's on your lease? Do you know what the rent is that Mr. Kelly, as the owner, is getting paid by Anthony Hill?
Do I know if the residents are what?
No, they're not the residents. What is Lux Sober Living?
Okay, what's Lux Sober Living paying? Do you,
The owners for the rent.
paying the owners of 125 Willow?
What's the lease say?
What does the lease say? I believe you said you do have a copy of the lease? Or what the agreement was, or is?
He was looking for it.
I'm sorry, can you
What,
repeat it or if
yeah, where is the lease and what is being paid? Because I'm gonna tell you, having lived in this neighborhood all my life, that house is not gonna hold a lot of people.
Just ask them for the lease.
The lease, I need to know how much.
Looking for it.
how much the rent is, the lease?
Yes.
Yes.
Again, that's something, you know, the lease is here. It's gotta be here somewhere, just give me a few minutes.
Thank you. I appreciate
Let's
it.
see here. So the monthly rent is $4,653.11.
Okay, thank you.
Is that just one rent or is that per resident?
Is that for all the residents or just for one, just the basic
It's for the building.
for the building?
It's just for the building.
Okay, thank you.
Good job.
Hello, Mr. Raywood. I'm Dr. Carrion, Henry Carrion, resident of Hackensack. Couple of questions pertaining to the fine that was levied to the company or the corporation. Just correct me if I'm wrong, they were fined $10,000, correct?
That's
And can you
correct.
please tell me why they were fined $10,000?
Well, that's the maximum amount that the statute allows us to assess for violating the Rooming and Boarding House Act of 1979. We take, failure to, or operating without a license seriously. So that's why we fine the individual $5,000 for that and $5,000 for obstruction, which is, in our statute, if you deny us admission, then, or refuse admission, then you're subject to a $5,000 fine for obstructing a commissioner's agent. So those two penalties at $5,000 each total $10,000.
Great, thank you.
But it is my understanding that the DCA agreed to reduce that penalty to $5,000 in exchange for admission of responsibility. Is that correct?
That's correct. In exchange for a pledge to comply and complying, removing the residence. And there is unfortunately this little gray area with these CSLRs when they first came out, when they first became the regulation became effective. There's a statement that said to the effect, and don't quote me on this, but whatever you're doing now, just get a license. So a lot of operators, understood that to say, well, I'm okay doing this now as long as I get a license. It doesn't mean I have to stop doing what I'm doing as long as I get a license. So we had 6 or 7 months of getting that message out across, and occasionally we run into this individual or these, and there's always a couple here and there where they don't quite get that you have to have a license before you operate. Because we issue 2 licenses, we issue a license to own. We could issue a license to own to Mr. Hill right now and to Mr. Brocata right now. But that doesn't mean he can open his doors and put residents in there. Because you can own a rooming house, or you can own a boarding house, or you can own a shelter, you can own any one of our licensed facilities without operating it. Because we issue that second license and that license to operate, that's telling the applicant that building complies with everything, that your records are correct, your record keeping is correct, your building, your physical plant of your property complies with our regulations, and that's when we issue the license to operate. So sometimes, there's a little confusion there, and we understand that, and I don't think it was with any kind of malicious attitude that Mr. Hill opened up, and it was explained to me that the individuals that were there were fresh out of whatever program and had really nowhere to go. So it was the old story, the road to hell's paved with good intentions. Well, it cost Mr. Hill $5,000 in this particular case.
All right. The obstruction part of their penalty leads me to believe that what you're saying right now is not accurate. The malicious intent of their actions is kind of dictated by the fact that they obstructed you when you investigated. So, what will disqualify a candidate from getting a license if not those 2 things that they did?
The individuals that refused admission were basically agents of Mr. Hill who were working in the home, preparing it for occupancy. No person identified themselves as a member of Look Sober Living. They were supposedly contractors working in the home. And at one point, when we got there earlier in the evening, about 6:30 one evening, a woman answered the door and she says, I don't feel comfortable letting you in. And we're certainly going to respect that. So we didn't go in. We didn't push the issue. The mere fact that it was a person that answered the door was enough for us.
Wow, that's pretty light. You said that you had about 240 different CLRs were active throughout the state of New Jersey, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And you mentioned that they're pretty much working well. That there
Yes.
doesn't seem to be many issues. Can you tell me, to the best of your ability, how many of those facilities have been fined for any kind of problems in the last 5 years?
I can't tell you that, because we don't have, we don't track, that information. The database that the Bureau uses is an Oracle-based database where there are not even updates for it. And I jokingly kid around, I could probably do more with a stone tablet and chisel, because our database does not track information like that, and it doesn't provide historical facts. So we can look at current information right now, but I couldn't look at that building and tell you what happened 5 years ago in that building, because it is just not capable of doing that. It's limited.
What is your current recollection? Within 1 year, 2 years, what is your current recollection of this?
Well, I mean, I often issue penalties, but, you know, we could be issuing penalties for not abating an evaluation report completely. You know, at any given time, there's at least 10 CSLRs in enforcement, because maybe they didn't finish citing all of or repairing all the citations that we issued, and failed to request an extension or failed to contest the violations.
So, you know, this doesn't give us a lot of confidence that you're overseeing these facilities very well, and you're not keeping track of what's actually happening there. Therefore, you can't make any real changes if things aren't going well the way you express, because we don't really know if that's truly happening, correct?
Well, no, that's incorrect. If a facility is, you know, what we would like to classify as a repeat offender, if I'm, you know, seeing your facility on my desk often, then perhaps, you know, we need to take a closer look, and that has happened. If we receive reports from law enforcement or a town like the city council of reports of, you know, unkempt property, or you know, allegations that maybe there's prohibitive substances being consumed on the property, you know, then we step up the action, the enforcement action. We conduct unannounced spot checks, and we may conduct regular unannounced spot checks. We've done that in the past. So we're very tuned in to regulating these within the scope of our statutory authority.
So what are the limits? When does a CSLR lose its license? In other words, how much leeway do you give them? Because it's very iffy, very loosey-goosey right now, the way you're explaining this. And basically, you can decide to enforce one and not enforce 10 others. So how does this work? Is it written down hard in an application, a policy, where if they don't meet certain standards, or they get reprimanded multiple times and they lose their license, or you just kind of making this up as you go along?
That's a good question. There's no guidelines. There are no guidelines. So, and I can say we have denied license.
We may need some guidelines, Mr. Ray Wood.
Well, we have the regulations. We have the regulations, and that's what we use to regulate these facilities. We have the law and we have the regulations. If the facility, for example, if there's repeated occurrences of we finding empty beer cans in the recycling bin, well, you know, that's a very tell, and we may issue a license revocation based on that. If in this particular case that you're referring to, if Mr. Hill has not removed the residents from that facility, he would be getting a license.
All right, but you're not able to tell me how many licenses you have revocated in the past year or two.
I've done one. We've
Okay.
denied one license.
So I want to finish by just reading something real quick in reference to the licenses, NJAC 527-1.6. Licensees, and this is letter F. No license shall be issued to any person if the Bureau determines that the issuance of a license to such person would be contrary to the best interest of the residents of any rooming or boarding house or of the public generally. For
Okay.
that to be enforced, you need to keep records. We need to know what the records are. And right now, you're not able to share that with us. So,
Well,
you know, I understand what the state is trying to do, but we have concerns when it comes to people who have difficulties with drugs or alcohol, and our children are there, our parks are there, our schools are nearby. We have to be more diligent, and our record keeping has to be a whole lot better. Thank you very much, Mr. Raywood, for coming up.
Good evening. Thank you for your time, everyone. We appreciate it. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And you mentioned respect. The people here need to be respected. And that's why we're here. This is a single-family residence area only. And a couple of questions. Who is listed as overseeing these group homes? Or in this case, Anthony Hill? Did he apply for that? Or Lux Sober Living? Who will
Well,
oversee
Anthony
the
Hill,
residents?
Anthony Hill is the primary owner of Lux Sober Living. So Anthony Hill will be the licensed owner of Lux Sober Living at 125 Willow.
But he
Now-
will be there 24/7.
No, he won't be there till 24/7, but the individual that's designated as their licensed operator must live on site.
And her name is?
And there's no requirement that the licensed operator, pursuant to our statute, our authorizing statute, the Rooming and Boarding House Act of 1979, and the regulations that require the licensed operator to be on site at all times. What some facilities have opted to do is license a second individual as an operator. So when one goes to work, the other may be there. And they do exercise a level of supervision over the residents. As I said earlier, some facilities have opted to hire 24/7 staff that are awake and alert for 24 hours a day, which is fine. I applaud that. And we encourage that, but it's not required at this point.
So who do they expect to be the appointed house manager if somehow they get approval?
I'm sorry, did I get the end of that?
Who do they list as the house manager?
I said earlier, Katrina Puscucci.
And she's had a background check also? She's
Yes,
had
no
a background
record.
check
Yeah.
in
Yes.
New York and New Jersey? Okay.
Well, we do a national criminal background check.
Okay. Do they have a curfew each day, Mr. Raywood? And does that change on weekends? We're talking in terms of family members and children being in the neighborhood. It's a single-family residence zone only.
Right. Again, we don't require proof of prior zoning approval.
No.
And typically, the residents are either working or they could be attending their a program, and what they call an IOP or intensive outpatient program, off-site daily. So,
Have you done a criminal background check on these residents that are supposed to be in there?
We don't regulate the residents. We do not do background checks on any residents.
Who does?
The option is at the owner of the facility, just as the option to conduct drug and alcohol screening on the residents, or is at the option of the owner.
Like your time on that one.
So if there are sex offenders there, that would be published, so we could tell that. If they.
Yeah, well, you could check the Vegas Law Registry regarding sex offenders.
Now, will there be drug testing, so far as you know, for the residents? Any drug testing?
Well, they haven't tested there yet, but a lot of facilities do drug test their residents randomly, some more so than others, but yes, they have that option. The regulations permit that.
And lastly, do you know specific qualifications for staff overseeing medication? I believe nalproxene is one of the newer ones that are very effective in dealing with alcoholism. I don't know about the other.
Right, well, that's a medication-assisted treatment, and there are no services provided in these facilities. So you cannot monitor somebody's medication, or you can supervise the self-administration of medication in a facility. As I said, there are no services. There are no clinical services. There are no medical services. There are no dietary services. This is a residence. That's all it is. There's no detox program going on in these facilities. This is strictly a residence where people live. If there's any kind of medication monitoring, it would be done at their program, or whoever the provider of the medication is, the subscriber, the medication.
New York City residents or New Jersey residents? Will it be Hackensack residents or from anywhere?
I don't know. We don't regulate the residents. It's a residence that's available to anybody.
But you're aware that it says Brick Cape Cod for 4 people only, legally in terms of fire department rules and everything else.
I'm aware of what?
It's a Brick Cape Cod home for 4 people, no more.
Well, Lux Sober Living is a New Jersey-based company. If their residents are coming from New York or Delaware or New Jersey, we don't track that.
All right, we appreciate you being on here, Mr. Rader. Thanks very much.
You're welcome, sir.
Joe Dawkins, Hackensack. You can hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Good evening, DCA officials. I didn't catch the other guy's name. Long, Robert Long. Is he an attorney?
That's good. No.
Deputy Commissioner. Okay, my first question was, how many total boarding homes are currently operating in Hackensack? Would you have that information?
Yeah, there's quite a few rooming houses in Hackensack. There are there's, I don't know, I'm going to say 10. I don't have the list with me.
So you're saying there's about 10, right?
Right.
Right. Now, the other thing was that I heard from you was that you have no way of tracking violations, but you allow people to operate and to get a license. How is that possible?
Well, it's akin to driving down the road and speeding and getting a ticket. If there's a repeated number of violations, you may lose your license. Right. The same thing applies to, these CSLRs. If you're a constant offender of the regulations, you run the risk of losing your license. And the only way we can actually track the penalties in this case is physically by hand. We're a bureau that works with paper. So all of our files are paper. When we do evaluation reports, the evaluator writes the citations out on NCR paper and physically serves the owner or the licensed operator with the violation, the evaluation report, and orders of the commissioner. So we don't have the ability to plug everything into a computer and say, okay, well, tell me how many violations 125 Willow had in the last year. We can track it simply by pulling the file and going through it page by page.
Okay.
So it's not like it's oblivious to us. And that's what we've had to do in the past, not so much with CSLRs, but with other facilities, like, well, you know, I've seen this file a lot. Or, you know, we have certain record keeping within the file itself that tells us how often, you know, the file has been in enforcement. And, you know, if they're a frequent flyer in the Enforcement Bureau, the enforcement unit, then we're going to look a lot closer at the facility, and that's when we may have to go page by page.
Right, and I think you mentioned the number 240.
That's correct.
So out of 240, you couldn't come up with a number for each facility as opposed to saying that they're just a bunch of paper? You couldn't categorize that, like, is your staff that minimal? I don't understand that you can't have a system for having the number of violations that facility number 1 has up until facility number 240 has. I don't understand. How do you not have that information readily available?
Because we don't have the database to support that information. What we do have is we have a website that in fact, it requires us to post the most recent evaluation report for any one of those 240 facilities. So I'll be glad to share with Mr. Kleiman the address for that website, but it's a DCA inspection posting website, and you can see exactly what we're looking at. You will see exactly a scanned copy of the evaluation report, which can show you how many violations number 1 facility had or number 240 facility had.
Okay. So my last question, the last comment is that you are allowed to issue a license. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
For an operator to operate, correct?
Correct.
And you're also allowed to issue a license to a boarding facility. What are the 2 licenses that you're allowed to issue in the state of New Jersey that we talked about tonight?
Our bureau, we license and regulate rooming and boarding houses and cooperative sober living residences. We license and regulate 3 classes of emergency shelters for the homeless. We license and regulate residential healthcare facilities, which is a type of facility for people that require a higher level of care than they would get in a boarding home. Each one of those facilities are regulated by a separate law and a separate set of regulations.
And like you said,
so we can license an owner and operator in any one of those 3 facilities. That's what the Bureau is statutorily authorized to do.
Right, and the second part was that you're regulating, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so the New Jersey State Commission of Investigation, SCI, held a hearing on October 11th of 2022. They focused on 3 areas: patient brokering, addiction treatment centers, and sober homes. The commission found problems at each step in the recovery process. Commissioner Berzicelli even asked, what type of environment was going on in the sober living homes? Were they truly sober, or was there no oversight going on in those facilities? So I was just wondering, has the GCA received the report from the SCI?
I actually testified for the SCI. The State Commission of Investigation is not a facility, not an agency that will charge anybody. What the SCI does is they investigate these things, any type of facility, and they make recommendations to the legislature for change. The report that I haven't seen the physical report. I did see part of the hearing. And again, what we do is GCA is more about bricks and mortar than we are the social service component. So what we're looking for when we go into a cooperative sober living residence is the building safe? Is the building clean? Or is the building over occupied? Are there any other problems that we have to concern ourselves with? We don't regulate the residents. We're not interviewing residents to find out if there's issues that would not necessarily concern us. We have in this state county welfare agencies that are designated to look out for the health, safety, and welfare of residents in certain institutional homes, and or that are receiving services from County Board of Social Services. So it would be their duty as so much like the local sheriff to respond to something like that, more so than DCA.
Okay, but did you see the report from the SCI?
I have not seen the written report. Again, the only thing I've seen is the only thing I witnessed was part of most of the hearing, and I didn't realize that one was published. And again, it's probably designed for the legislature, but not me. But if it's available and I can get it, then I'll get it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, I'm Christina, and I have a couple of questions. I would like to just go back to the curfew. Did you say there was a curfew established or not? Because because sober living houses do have curfews. They are more lenient than partial hospitalization, but they have curfews usually probably around 10 o'clock, unless they have a job and they have a permission from the house manager to be able to work. They need to prove that.
So our regulations do not require a curfew to be incorporated into house rules. If the individual owner decides that a curfew is warranted, or they want a curfew and they incorporate it in their house rules, then it's entirely up to them to enforce it. And now, keep in mind also that with the amended regulations, DCA allows, DCA put in there that you can immediately evict an individual that is violating the house rules or has brought in a prohibitive substance, whether it's drugs or alcohol, what have you. So if they're found to be under the influence, they can literally be evicted immediately without going through the landlord-tenant process. Equally responsible for that is the licensee. They are required to maintain that sober environment free of alcohol and drugs. So if breaking that curfew is a violation of house rules, the CSR licensee now has that option to say, evict them immediately.
Okay, and then just to follow up with that, where do they go if they are evicted? Are they expected to go to the Hackensack homeless shelter? Where are they going after that? Are they left on the street?
Well, I don't know if any particular situation with this has occurred. But I would think that either if there was a problem with an individual under the influence, that the first responders would be summoned and they would figure out probably the best place to take the individual.
And what if this happens after
what would
midnight?
go-
I'm sorry to cut you off. What if this happens after midnight, when you had mentioned that 24-hour surveillance of a house manager is not required? Who's going to be there in case of an emergency or, God forbid, a tragedy to one of these recovering addicts? They can overdose, God forbid. We don't want to wait for them to come out on a stretcher. So who's going to be there to monitor this at 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, or at those hours? Is that Karina
Well,
Bucci?
Unfortunately, it has happened. You know, and it's you know, when you're dealing with this population, it's going to happen. And it's sad when it does. I do know that these homes are all equipped, or most of the homes that I know of are equipped with Narcan, and they do train the individuals responsible in the home to administer Narcan. I mean, that's may not be a you know, an area of comfort, but at least we know that somebody's. And what I have found, what I have observed is, you know, these individuals are kind of joined at the hip. You know, they are supporting one another in their recovery, and when they see a fellow resident faltering, they'll have called the police, have called the ambulances, have notified the house, you know, the licensed operator, have notified the owner. So they have taken, you know, responsibility to the extent that they want to, they don't want to see their fellow resident, you know, die.
Okay, so I'm feeling like I'm not really clear. Who is monitoring this house on a 24-hour, who's monitoring this house on a 24-hour basis?
Well, there's no requirement to monitor the house
So
for
then
24
how
hours.
can we prevent a tragedy if the people that are responsible for administering Narcan are not there?
You know, that's
Scary.
unfortunately, if that
Scary.
happens, but that, you know, that's a decision that was made by an individual, and it certainly might have been the wrong decision. You know, these individuals are in these homes are on the tail end of their recovery.
So I'm
You know,
sorry,
they've
but
done.
I'm so sorry to cut you off, but as a resident, as a tax-paying resident, I speak on behalf of everyone in our community, maybe even everyone in Hackensack and everybody here, including the student council. I mean, oh my God. I'm not meaning to say PTA. I'm so, okay. The city council.
You made us feel young.
I am just not confident when there's not 24-hour monitoring. How do they not require 24-hour monitoring? I'm familiar with sober houses. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people can sit here and say that, you know, addiction is rampant. And if you don't know an addict in your family or have a recovering addict, you know a friend or friend of something. You know, most sober living houses, not only do they have curfews if they're run efficiently, okay, but they have 24-hour care. They have a nurse on staff that is administering medication, because a lot of these addicts are not just recovering addicts. They're on medications for bipolar or schizophrenia or any other kind of mental health. And, you know, someone needs to, they are not supposed to administer their own medication, even in a sober living residence, if it's run efficiently. I don't feel that this is being run efficiently. I think that the people that are running it are inefficient, to say the least, especially considering the background that the vetting process, everything as a whole just seems flawed. I'm so sorry. I don't know what to say. I don't feel safe, and no one here feels safe, really.
Well, I don't disagree with you about the 24 hours. I don't disagree with you about quite a few things. But again, the regulations are what they are. The department has gotten together recently, and these regulations expire in August of 2024. And having regulated these facilities from the onset, from 2018, you know, we made recommendations to improve the regulations. I can't get into the details because I'm told they're confidential until they're published in the New Jersey Register. So hopefully they go through the process that they have to through the Attorney General and the Governor's Office, etc., and they agree with me or agree with the Bureau and propose addition or amendments to the regulations. And I feel that there is a place for more supervision, but for now, the previous administration didn't allow it. So we only can go by what our regulations say. We cannot make things up and say, okay, well, we want you to have 24-hour notice when we have no
I'm sorry, so
regulation.
if you don't have the regulations, who sets forth these regulations? Lux Sober Living or the primary owner? Because it is his house, right? John Kelly, Bricado, and the other woman who's on the house as an owner. I would think that it would be a very dangerous situation if you have someone that is not monitoring things properly, right? And there's a tragedy that happens, doesn't it sit on their neck and on the state's neck for issuing the license? It's cut if you know he's muted. I can't hear him.
Seem to have lost sound.
My question, just to be more specific until he figures out how to unmute, I just want to know who sets forth the regulations of the house? Is it Anthony Hill of Lux Sober Living or the primary owners of the home? Meaning curfew and house manager, who sets that? It's individually done, who does it?
I only heard very little of that question. I don't know if it's the team's problem, if we've exceeded our allotted time. I don't know what the problem is.
Well, we can hear you now, you're good. We hear you.
Good.
You're good now.
Yes.
So my question was, who sets forth the curfews and everything else? Is it the primary owner or is it Anthony Hill of Lux Sober Living?
So the owner of the CSLR program, which in this case is Anthony Hill and Lux Sober Living, they create the house rules and they enforce the house rules.
Okay, and then I just have a couple of questions regarding the LLC. Anthony Hill, you said, is the sole owner of Lux Sober Living or just the primary owner?
He is the sole member.
Okay, are you sure about that? Because I have done enough of research to know there are actually 3 owners of Lux Sober Living.
Okay.
And this information is easily accessible right on the state records when you research LLCs. So there are 3 owners, and if you like, I can tell you who they are.
Well, it was disclosed to us that Anthony Hill is a member of the Lux Sober Living.
Okay.
And he's designated as the primary owner.
Okay, so Lux Sober Living, if you go online and research this information, he's only one of 3 owners. And the 3rd owner, I'm not sure, Timothy Lisinski is the 2nd owner, and the 3rd owner is John Kelly's daughter and Anthony Brocado's wife, Alexis Kelly. I'm not sure if you're aware of that. Were you aware of that?
I am not.
Okay, now you know, and you can research it yourself, you don't have to take my word for it. Also, are you familiar that Anthony Hill also runs Next Wind Recovery, which I'm assuming is the therapy and the IOP facility that these addicts come from? Are you familiar with that?
I do know that his correspondence is from the Next Wind Recovery, yes.
Okay,
But
are you
again, we
aware?
don't regulate.
I'm
Let
just
me
sorry to
finish.
cut you off, I just want to get, yeah. Before I forget, I'm getting old.
We do not regulate intensive outpatient programs.
I understand that,
Nor
but that's
is it-
that's not where I'm going with this, sir. Okay, Anthony Hill is the CEO of Next Wind Recovery. It's right online if you go to the website. Are you aware that Alexis Bricado works in human resources at his facility, works for him there? In addition to being the owner of Lux Sober Living. And the owner of the house, technically, because she's married to Anthony, right? I want to make sure that you're aware of this. If you're not, you're aware now. Were you aware of any of this information prior to today?
It doesn't really matter.
It doesn't?
You know,
I'm sorry, what?
it doesn't. No. The individual that's been designated as the primary owner or the person to communicate and to serve notices and orders to, if issued to Lux Sober Living, is Anthony Hill. They could have many members of Next Wind Recovery, and it does not matter because Anthony Hill is the applicant, is the individual.
Okay. I'm thinking that anyone in a job in human resources has direct access to patients, their records, their files, their insurance information. Seems awfully convenient, don't you think?
Well, I don't know that they do. This is a residence. Nothing is.
She works there, she's human resources, she has access to patient records and files. Is this really about, I just wanted to make sure that, is this really about helping the addicts, or is this a business deal? I'm having a hard time grasping this, because it just seems very interesting to me that there's all these connections, and I just want to make sure, I think as the State Department, I think you should be aware of this, and I think that you should be taking these connections very seriously. And that's just my humble opinion. And let me see, I know I had something else for you.
You own resources through the other business, and he's the CEO.
Somebody talking.
If we could finish up.
Oh, okay. So, Mr. Raywood, we truly appreciate you coming here. I have to say, though, I still don't feel like I have the level of confidence that my family or that anybody else's family is truly safe. I feel that the state has not demonstrated that its ability to effectively monitor this house or control this house and this situation, especially since the system does not allow proper vetting of the licensed operators and all the people involved, including the house manager, who I understand was just informed to me moments ago has a criminal record. And I don't, we've put all our concerns here. There is obviously something very fundamentally wrong with this process. It's been brought into our neighborhoods, and I feel like the best course of action at this time is not to issue the license. Put it on pause. At least pause it. At this time, respect our concerns, reopen the investigation and the vetting process for this application, and maybe possibly consider different applicants, because it's not about a CSLR. I think they're very beneficial in the right hands. And these are not the right people. Thank you very much, sir.
Let me acknowledge first that you are not personally responsible for the regulations. But I have a couple of questions for you. Number one, would you agree that the population in this house could be considered a transient population, as opposed to someone that has a lease, as someone that's obliged to stay there for a certain amount of time, or someone who owns the property?
Well, it's the individuals that live there's decision how long they stay there.
Okay. So it is a transient population.
It's a transient, no, the intent of the CSLR is to provide a permanent residence for individuals who are supporting one another in their recovery. If their decision is to stay for 30 days or 3 years, that's entirely up to them.
Right, but they have no obligation to stay there, and they can be replaced by somebody else when you have a vacancy among 10 people who can reside there. Is that right?
Right, well that's,
Right. Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
And also, the transient residents are not checked or are not obliged to be checked for a criminal record. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So you have 10 people who are transients in a house, single family area or 2-family houses, who may have a criminal background. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, what legislator or what regulator do you think would be comfortable living next to that kind of a situation?
Well, again, these are individuals that are, working to recover and become, valuable members or members of the community. This is not a population that, is facing jail time, things like that in most cases.
Well, that's aspirational, but it doesn't necessarily reflect the reality. Another question. Is there a limit to the number of such residences that can be in a given community or in a given geographical area? Or could we have one house after another?
The regulations do not limit the number of CSLRs in a municipality or statewide.
So you could occupy, or these houses could be established, let's say in one block, where we have many houses containing people who are transients and who may have a criminal background. Would that be accurate?
Well, that's correct, because there are no regulations prohibiting the number of CSLRs in a municipality.
Okay, final question. Were the regulations promulgated by a regulatory bureau or by elected officials in the state?
It was administrative. It was done by the department.
Okay, done by unelected officials.
By the department, correct.
Correct, okay. You said the regulations will be up in 2024. They may be reviewed and changed. Once this residence is established under present rules, can their license be revoked?
I'm sorry, once the facility is licensed under the current regulations, what was the second part?
Can that license be revoked if new regulations are put into law?
So if the regulations if there's amendments to the regulation that take effect, we'll just say in September of 2024, any licensed CSLR would have to now comply with the updated regulations.
Okay.
So to answer your question, if they fail to comply, then yes, their license can be revoked.
Thank you. That answers my question.
I believe, sir, you already spoke, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
I just want to keep in mind, we don't have all night. I mean, we are keeping these individuals. There are some people online that have not had an opportunity to speak yet. So if you're going to make your question, please make it very brief so we can at least give those folks who are waiting a quick opportunity.
I will, Mr. Klein. Thank you. Well, just briefly, thank you, Mr. Raywood. We all want to do what is ethical, and I'm sure you do too. You're a brick and mortar guy. Have you inspected 125 Willow Avenue? Or who has? Have you inspected 125 Willow Avenue in our town?
No, we have not.
No.
Now, let me explain the process. So when the application is complete, and by complete, I mean we have received a fire certificate, which is indicating to the Bureau that the building complies with the Uniform Fire Code. The applications are complete, the criminal background checks are done, any vetting process that needed to be, any further vetting process needed was accomplished, and of course the fees paid. That's when we deem the application complete. At that point in time, we tell the owner of the property to contact the DCA Office of Local Code Enforcement, and they will come out, they'll schedule an inspection, they'll come out, the DCA construction official will come out and inspect the building for compliance with the Uniform Construction Code. Once that's accomplished, then DCA evaluators will go to the building and take the measurements and ascertain how many people this building can support. What is the license capacity of this building? So the reason why we have not taken it to the next step is because only today, the Division of Fire Safety have requested the Division of Fire Safety to contact the local fire official because apparently there was some problem registering the building as a life hazard use. The life hazard use form was provided to the Bureau today, and I believe the inspection will be conducted tomorrow by the Hackensack City Fire Prevention Bureau.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I thank you everyone from the public. If you'd like to stay, because there may be additional comments by folks online, please do. But for now, let's at least respect those folks that have been waiting so patiently. And I'll let you folks open it up to whoever you wish that's online. And we'll stay and listen if that's okay before we close our meeting.
I don't know, Frank, is it going to be up to DCA to unmute, or how will it be?
It'll be up to them. I don't have that.
Yeah, so I mean, Mr. Ringwood, I know there's a number of people online. It would be up to you to, I guess, to admit them if they've got questions. I don't know if there's a raise your hand tool or something that you can look at, and if someone's raised their hand, you could ask them to speak.
I think I can just, hang on a second.
Yeah, the Teams meeting is run through, it's done by DCA, not by us.
Yes, so you would have to do that, sir.
Okay. I guess I don't know what I'm doing here. How do I get these individuals?
Just say the.
Oh, I heard somebody.
Yeah, I think you just gotta click on the person.
Yeah, just try clicking on them and see what happens.
All right, so I'm Deborah LaBruce.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
There's two areas that I would like to question. The one is the primary owner of the property. I understand you said that if there is more than one owner of the property, it's required that one be appointed as the primary owner, and that's the person the DCA will deal with rather than dealing with each owner. That rule, I'm sure, was meant to streamline the process and not overburden the DCA with the redundant tasks of dealing separately with each owner. That being said, I do not believe the rule is meant to alleviate the DCA from doing their due diligence, nor was it meant to allow the owners to hide the criminal records of the owners not appointed as the primary owner. It is my opinion that if the DCA did their due diligence, they should have vetted all owners, and only if every owner passed the vetting process should a primary owner be designated. Is there anything in the rules that allow you not to do that?
Well, the only thing that would allow me not to do that is if the individual does not provide us with a notice of authorization to conduct a criminal background check, and under what authority DCA would require that is something that an attorney would have to explain to me, as I'm not a licensed attorney. So.
Okay, if you see that there are 3 owners to this property, are you not allowed to vet those 3 owners? Then if
the only one individual has is been designated as the individual that will be responsible for the 3 owners in this case.
Okay, I think that maybe that should be relooked at, because that just gives them the ability to hide what they don't want you to see. So I think that if you just vetted all owners, and then if they pass, say, okay, now pick one, that would work out much better for everyone. And now, before you made a comment saying that if there are multiple violations, but you need it in paper because you could follow paperwork. So I just want to ask, I think you're aware the applicants, I think that's been established tonight, that you're aware the applicants have operated without permission to do so. Is that true?
That's correct.
Okay, and you do have paperwork on that, correct? You're also aware that applicants that blatantly lied to city officials, made up elaborate stories about living in the building, they had a baby there, a father there, and the people that were supposedly coming at night were fellow employees, not people who needed the SLR. Is that correct?
It's been alleged that that's been, I don't know it for sure, but it's been alleged.
Do you have paperwork from the city once they investigated?
Well, we have exchanged multiple emails with Mr. Flyman, representing the city of Hackensack, but that's it. I mean, that's the only.
So I needed to see if what the city is saying is true.
I can
Well-
justify that.
Again, there'd be no reason to, because the one individual that's applied, that's who we focus on. Because that's the individual that's going to be responsible in the event we do the penalties. And whether it's a corporation or not, that is the facility that's going to, that's the individual that's going to be responsible for any penalties.
I think we're both in agreement that these DSLRs are needed. There's a huge population that needs that. I think we're also in agreement that the CSLRs were created for the people that need them, not for people to possibly be making money off of them. I think that because, let me finish please.
Yeah.
I think because of the population that is going to be living there, the people operating these CSLRs have to be upright citizens. You have been giving so much evidence that shows these people are not, that I'm not even understanding why this meeting was necessary and that this application hasn't been denied before now.
Well, again,
You've had opportunity to investigate. If this was important, I would think that you would have by now. And although you can hide behind different rules and regulations, the bottom line is it's still your responsibility. You can either do the quick way or the quick way. That's on you. That's up to you.
So let me respond to your question. The individuals that you're referring to are not the operators. They merely own the property. They have conveyed control of that property to the operator, to the prospective operator. That's the Anthony Hill and Company. So that doesn't matter. They're not involved in the day-to-day operation of the facility.
Well, they said. There's been so many lies that I don't know how you can believe anything anybody's saying. Also, from what I was under the impression, the mortgage that the owners took is a federal mortgage where you need to live at the residence for 1 year. Are you aware of that?
It's been told to me, but again, we don't regulate mortgages. I mean,
But
there's.
you're investigating whether these people are upright citizens. You're investigating the character of these people. If they're lying to you, this is easy enough to prove. Are you looking for the truth or are you looking to pass this through?
Well, we're not.
You said before, you made a comment before that if you found beer cans, you could revoke a license. What these people have done is much more severe. So, like I'm saying to you, considering the extent of manipulation and lying that the applicants have already exhibited, I asked you how could you possibly approve this CSLR? And I'm asking that you do your due diligence, take all the facts into consideration before you make a decision.
Again, we're going to treat this as CSLR just like we've treated the other 240. You know, if the owner operator of the program meets our requirements, and the owner of the property meets our requirements, then we have to license them according to the.
But if there are questionable circumstances that come up, isn't it your due diligence to check that out?
If it's something that falls within the scope of our regulatory authority, yes.
So you can approve a CSLR for a residence that that the federal government is saying is not allowed.
I don't know that for sure. And if they're violating their mortgage or mortgage laws, then it would be incumbent on the person that discovered this to report it to the correct agency so it can be.
But before you approve it, wouldn't you want to know whether that was true or not? I mean, it's not so hard to look, it wouldn't be so hard to find out whether it was true. If it was true, there should be no question this should not be done.
Well, again, as I said, we do not look into mortgages and mortgage fraud. If there's an allegation of that, then it should be reported to the correct agency.
This is very disappointing.
All right, I'm going to ask for another person because it's getting late.
Go ahead.
This Mayor LaVos, are you on? Yes. Mayor?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank you guys for coming out tonight. I wish I could be there. Unfortunately, I'm out of the country right now. But I definitely did not want to miss this meeting, so I was able to get on. So yeah, I have elected officials, myself and the people sitting there on the dais. We all have an obligation to we answer to the taxpayer, and so do you as agents of the state of New Jersey. I think there has to be a little bit more due diligence on this. A lot of the things need to be looked into that were mentioned tonight. I'm very, very unhappy with the lies and the deceit and the shell game that was presented to our city officials, especially our zoning officer. You got your rules and regulations, right? But it just gets, the way this thing started off on a bad foot with all the deceit and lies, it just doesn't sit well with the city. And the residents here tonight said they're not against the CSLR. Certainly people who are recovering need help and need to get back on track with their lives and become productive. And I believe in
Yeah. He's traveling, so, it's probably weak Wi-Fi.
All right, I'm going to go on to somebody else.
Yeah, I'm back. I'm sorry. I'm down, like I said, I'm out of the country, so the line is not that great. But I asked if you guys really do a little bit more due diligence taken because of what was done to the city and how these people who are running this and own this facility lied and deceived members of our zoning department and others. So we really need to take that into consideration. I know that doesn't matter to you guys, it's not part of your rules and regulations, but it's the right thing to do. So I ask that you look into that before moving forward with this. Thank you, guys.
You're welcome, John. Thank you. Susan?
Yes.
Okay.
I have a question.
Okay.
My question is, all these people that are coming in, that's, not against the CSLR, but working with this type of person, people that I did for 30 years, they lie, they deceive each other, they will cover for each other. And I'm talking about the clients. I'm not talking about the staff. Now, the staff itself, who are they licensed by? Are they licensed by New York or are they licensed by New Jersey that will come in and overlook these people? And what kind of books are kept that when they dispense medication, because I'm sure a lot of them have psych issues, and I'm sure a lot of them are going into the program instead of going to jail, and we will not be informed of what their criminal background is, we will not be informed about their psychological history, so they can be walking the street, walking around their kids, going up to the park, hanging out with the kids or whatever, and if they have this kind of issues, even when you give Narcan, when they overdose in the house, the first thing you have to do is call 911. So now all the residents, if this is going to be a habit, all the residents are going to be woke up 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning because they're going to constantly have 911 there. It's not fair to everybody. It's not fair to the residents themselves. I have lived in this neighborhood for over 50 years. So I know this neighborhood extremely well. I have worked with this type of client for over 30 years. And I understand what the program is if it's run correctly. This is not run correctly. In-house, when you have clients like this, they are on medication. They have one specific person with a log that has to log in the medication. Where's the medication going to be checked? Where's the medication going to be kept? Who's going to be dispensing it? I'm sure they're not going to dispense it to themselves.
Let me explain. There are no services provided in these facilities. So if a resident has medication, whether they're using it to help them recover, or whether they're using it just because they have, a medical or a need for a medication, then it's the resident's responsibility to keep it. Now, what we do is we insist that the licensee provide lockboxes for the residents, so at least the resident's medication is secure. They cannot store it for the resident. They certainly can't dispense it or administer it. That's not the type of facility this is. This is a residential environment. And a lot of the facilities that I'm aware of do not accept people that have some requirement to take medication-assisted treatment for recovery, because from what I understand, the medication can be dangerous to people that they aren't prescribed to take it. So that's usually reserved for individuals who aren't in your typical CSLR. And any medications that are administered or prescribed or dispensed are done at a intensive outpatient program.
And its outpatient program is great, but when you have weekends and holidays, a lot of them aren't open. That's number one. Number two, lock boxes, where are they kept? In the resident's room, or are they kept under lock and key by the house person?
They're kept in the resident's room. The licensee cannot lock the medications up. And these are the things that we look for when we're doing our evaluations, because if we have found, what's under, they have to open every door for us. Open up a door and there's medication. Well, you can't have medication. So one or two things. You've got to get rid of the resident that's requiring medication, or close your doors.
And can be picked up and moved and easily opened. And most of them are if they're on patients, sites for drug and alcohol problems, mostly drugs, it's mostly that they're like on methadone or they're on a narcotic to supersede their tremors.
And again, like I said, most of the CSLRs that we license do not allow individuals that are on that type of medication to reside in the home. Because they know they can't keep it secure. That's the intent of it, this is a residence, this is not a detox center.
Well, you can get it like that 100%, because a lot of the CSLRs, you don't have to do a complete detox before you can go into a CSLR. You don't have to complete. You can go into a CSLR at any time in the program when you feel you're up to it, whether it's 30 days, 60 days, or that's the law. You don't have to complete a complete detox program in order to go into a CSLR.
Well, the owner's taking a big responsibility there, that's for sure.
No, it's the residents that are taking a big responsibility if you license it. Because there's too many and too much, that's been going on already. You have people living there, and until we notified the city didn't even know. They lied on their application. I mean, that alone is red flag. You're going to be neighborhoods with kids and elderly people. They're going to be in neighborhoods where we don't even know if they're drug, besides being, having a drug problem, an alcohol problem, we don't know, are they racist? Did the judge say, well, you can go into a detox program instead of going to jail, this is your third offense? What was the offense? Was it a B&E? Was it rape? Was it robbery? Was it trying to lure kids? Well, we don't know any of this. And it's unfair to us. There's too many children in the entire neighborhood area. And they're too close to a park.
Okay.
I would seriously ask you to triple think about putting it here. The CSLRs that are working fine, yeah, they're on Market Street in Saddlebrook, which is a main street. It's not in the middle of a residential. They have another one over on 208. Beautiful. It's not in the middle of a residential area. If you said you were putting a group home there for people that are handicapped, fine. Because they need help. But to put unquestionable people in a neighborhood that can harm children, can harm elderly, can harm anybody in this neighborhood, it's unfair to us. And it's unfair to our facilities, it's unfair to the fire department, it's unfair to the police department. They're gonna have to be probably going over there.
Again, the regulations as they're written do not allow me to pick and choose what facilities go where. This is what and I can't legislate from the field or make up a rule as we go along and make changes that aren't backed up by the regulations.
Regulations really seriously need to be changed because what you're doing is putting everybody in the whole entire northern section at risk.
So listen, I'm not going to disagree with you that there are changes that need to be made. So my suggestion is to contact your legislators, have a conversation, and perhaps they can, affect a change legislatively.
Well, they've already lied to you several times, so, I don't see what the issue is on not giving a license. If the company that's running this is lying to you, you know the general population that's gonna be there is gonna lie because they cover for each other. I've seen it, I've heard it, I've sat in meetings with these people. And they'll lie to your face to make you think to give you the idea of whatever you want, that's what we're gonna do to make you happy. So, I have to disagree with you, and I really hope you think about licensing.
Thank you very much.
When you can sit there, honestly, and work with these people and see firsthand what they're capable of, as opposed to, no offense, but sitting behind the desk and just pulling up paperwork. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So maybe take one or two more, and then I think we're probably coming to the point. I don't want to outweigh our welcome. You know, if there's any one or last two people, maybe have a flag up and we could finish by no later than 9:30. It's 9:17 now. Would that be okay with you, Mr.
I don't see any more hands up. That's fine with me, but I don't see any more hands up.
All right, well then, then I guess what we can do is you've answered all the questions. Obviously, I think you've heard a lot from the community, and we'll be in further communication with you as developments occur. I don't know if any of the council have any closing remarks, or whether we'll
I
just...
just would like to say, from the council's perspective, thank you very much. You know, I hope we haven't outworn our welcome. We appreciate, we know it's after hours, and you've given us, a lot of time and a lot of information. I would just hope that you've also heard a lot, and I hope maybe you would take the time to digest it before you make a decision. And any additional information you need from us, we'll be happy to supply to you. But let's take time there's no reason, I don't believe, to rush through making this decision. And you've heard an awful lot, I think, tonight from the folks that live here. So what I'm asking, and I'm sure I have the council's support, is to just take some time to consider these things and see what you can do and get back to us with any information you may. And we need to close our meeting as well.
Yes. Anything
Thank
else,
you very
Mr. Rowley? Or the other gentlemen?
Thank you.
Okay, I think everyone in the crowd again said thank you for your time tonight. Obviously it's, late in the evening, and you went above and beyond to take the time to address us here.
You're welcome. Have a good evening, everyone.
You too. Thank you. May I have a motion to close the meeting? Roll call.
Deputy Mayor Canestrino. Councilmember Pataglia. Councilmember Carroll. Mayor LaBrus.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.